So, you want to be a real estate investor, but where do you start? How do you know what information and sources to trust? That's where I come in. I'm Jonny Cattani, and this is the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. Hey guys, real quick, before we start, go to investwithcattani.com and download my free ebook, Is Commercial Real Estate Recession Proof? Now to today's show. What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Jonny Cattani, and I'm joined today by John Lenhart. He was a young attorney who did not have a passion for practicing law. Starting with a two-family in 2007, he has grown his real estate holdings into assets of around $50 million today. His holdings consist of around 250 apartment doors, approximately 350,000 square feet of self-storage and light industrial, about 2,500 storage units, and is continually looking to grow. He has a joint venture, but no syndications to date. Most of the growth has been self-funded using proceeds from prior acquisitions to fund future purchases. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We had a nice little conversation off camera, but excited to chat today. You mentioned that you're no longer a practicing attorney, but let's kind of tell that story. Take us back, how you started out and how you got into commercial real estate.
Sure. Well, I graduated from law school, but I never really had that passion for practicing law. It was more, it seemed like the practical thing to do is what it was. But I, found myself involved with a small firm doing some workers' comp, and I hated that. I can't do this. At the time, I had just bought my first two-family and got the real estate bug, and was able to. I left the law practice after a couple of years and started working in-house as a lawyer for a bank. And unfortunately, the Great Recession hit, and the bank unfortunately wasn't the strongest bank, and I had to find another opportunity after that. And as at that time, there were really no jobs for attorneys, and I said, you know what, I don't want to fight for scraps. Let's reinvent myself. I was newly married at the time, and my wife, she had a good job, and we didn't have kids yet, so it was good to kind of support us as we started this journey. So I still worked and still had other jobs, but I wasn't practicing, and I was focusing on building up the real estate portfolio, starting with some small 4-family apartments. I had a partner that we invested in some college rentals, and that was fun for a while. And started leveraging that up, and grew that into larger apartment complexes as well as self-storage. And those are two asset classes that I really enjoy today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could not agree more. We were chatting off camera all about self-storage. You're working on a deal. I'm working on a ground up development. Love it. What was it back then that caught your attention? Because, it's really starting to take off now. You're starting to see cap rates compress, not nearly to the level of multifamily, but I don't think it'll be long before it happens. So what was it back then that really caught your attention about self-storage?
Well, back then you could get stuff for a very good cap rate. It was not as well accepted, even in the lending community. I mean, I know a number of banks that wouldn't lend to us for a first self-storage deal, mostly because they didn't like the asset class. They thought it was, old sheds and people could have a meth lab out of it, which isn't exactly accurate. But I love the cash flow from it. Prior to getting into the self-storage business, I spent a couple years watching Scott Meyer's videos that he would post on YouTube, and he's put on a number of classes. So I even went to one of those classes, which was very nice and very informative. And it reassured me as we were getting into this. This was very much a cash flow business that we could run semi-remotely, and that was the nice thing about it. We didn't have to have someone full service, and we could use the space to come up with various different revenue streams to enhance the business. And so that's what really appealed to me about self-storage.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a lot of ancillary revenue drivers So let's kind of touch on some of those. It's obviously kind of market dependent, right? Depending on, how you're going to set it up. But what are some things, high level that you look for in a deal, and, kind of some inefficiencies you look for, and strategies to implement?
Well, I love the mom and pop business. If they, I think 80% of the self-storage facilities are owned by mom and pop still, give or take. And I love being able to buy an asset that someone started, but maybe not as capable of running as efficiently as I could, or they're just tired and they've decided they don't want to invest in the business anymore. So I like taking those and adding the efficiencies that weren't there, and that's just easy money right there to make those more efficient. On top of that, just looking for other opportunities where we can continue to grow revenue and rents. I use our first facility as a perfect example. Uh, Run by mom and pop, nice couple looking to retire, and they didn't have any sophistication in their office. They had rents that were below market. They never raised rents. You move in and you'll never have a rent increase for as long as you live, as long as you rent it. And they would give away the lock. They would, there's no admin fees. And even on the ledger, their bookkeeping, they'd write along the side of the contract every month that when the person paid their bill, and just record it that way. So, some of these contracts were 3 years old, had writing on the front and back showing every month they paid. Not the
Wow.
most efficient way. So, we were able to put a web-based system in, something with the cloud, which at the time was just starting. We discontinued the money they spent on yellow page ads, and we're able to direct those to web-based ads, and started charging for our locks, started charging for admin fees, we brought U-Haul in for additional income source, but also helped us, get people to the unit to fill the units as well. So all that stuff really kind of helped drive growth there.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, that's one nice thing. As I mentioned, I was just having a conversation with an investor and kind of explaining the space and how, there are, like you mentioned, 80% still mom and pop operated, and really there's an opportunity to come in and set these up. And, you're not dealing with a place that people live, right? So the same sort of tenant laws and that don't apply.
And that's nice. You don't have to you're not getting those midnight calls about a pipe bursting or the ceilings leaking from the rain. So those are nice additions. Yes, you still get some calls about maintenance, but they can be handled at a reasonable time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so along the lines of, obviously it's a little bit more of a hands-off asset. What are some things that you've put in place in terms of management to allow you guys to manage remotely?
Sure. Now, when we first started, we weren't managing completely remotely. We'd have some part-time workers there. And now we have enough facilities where we do have some staff that oversees a lot of it. But we've done some stuff. We've had kiosks at a few of our facilities. I don't love the kiosk. I don't think they get as much value anymore. Everyone who has a smartphone has a kiosk just on that phone right now. So, the big thing is we have call centers, we have the ability to rent online and move in online. Those are the keys, letting people have access to move in when they want to move in, and move in on their own. That's the key, where we don't have to always have someone be there to have them sign a piece of paperwork. They can do that all electronically. We have the call centers, and we do email notifications and text notifications to have them pay their bill electronically, where we can encourage people to sign up for auto pay. Those are all the things we do to manage it, so there can be less people involved. Now
Absolutely.
you still got to go out there and have a physical presence at some point. You still got to walk the site, check in, check out units, but there's ways to manage that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially when you can kind of niche down geographically, right, and have facilities that are within the vicinity of each other, then obviously, you know, you don't have to have one person for each location. You can have them, you know, one person for 3 locations, for example.
Correct. And the technology there too. I mean, we don't encompass all of the available options, but you can do so much just with the locks and everything now, where you can do whatever you can have. If you want to get super, super technical, you can get a lock that will automatically unlock or overlock the tenant if they're late. Um, that we don't have those, but those are where the industry is going now. And those are ways that you can have a 200,000 square foot facility and have someone off-site managing it the whole time.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that where technology is going in terms of really taking the human element out of it. But like you mentioned, ultimately there's something to be said about that. You know, someone goes, wants a tour, checking in and out. You know, obviously, ideally, we all get sticky tenants and they stay forever and put it on auto pay and never look back. But, you know, there's some component there where, at least personally, I think, you know, kind of a human element is definitely necessary.
Yeah. And, there where you can have someone with some office hours, even if it's not full time, that's obviously important. We do still have a lot of tenants that will ask to say, when will someone be on site? I'd like to actually physically see the metal box that I'm going to rent. And, to them, you can do your best to accommodate them.
Absolutely. So, you know, you kind of mentioned, you know, in the beginning, you were a little more hands-on in terms of your approach. That's changed now that you have more facilities. But what are some things for people who are just getting into it? You know, some strategies and some things, maybe some mistakes you made in the beginning that you can kind of, you know, help out those who are just getting into the asset class.
Oh, I'm still learning every day and still making mistakes. Um, uh,
That
yeah,
never changes.
no, I would say, and we're more long-term hold people, so we haven't done much on the, especially on the storage side of selling. And so from that end, we've done refinancing and cash outs on that end. So that's been kind of our exit to repay the investors, but or repay us. But what I would say, just kind of kicking the tires, learning the lien laws. That's always important. Staying up on top of those, because you always have, you're always going to get calls from people who have their goods sold that are claiming that it wasn't quite right, or you might have missed this or that. And so just making sure on that type of stuff, you're checking every box. I would say the biggest mistake that I've made, though, probably was with our first facility, and we still have that, and it works out very well, and it's been very profitable. But we bought that in a floodplain, and
Oh, wow.
that was, yeah. And I think we discounted a little bit of what that meant. And you talk to people in the neighborhood, and they talk about the history, and they say, oh, there's really no flood here. It's, water might occasionally flood the street, but not flooding the actual property. Well, as development in this area, because it's a fast growing area, that's happened more and more. It's taken some of the available floodplain away and caused more flooding area down by us. So that's been a little disconcerting, trying to work through that. But at the same time, it's still very profitable, and it's worked out well for us. But it's something I'd rather not have to deal with if I had my choice. So that'd probably be the biggest mistake, is don't buy in a floodplain.
Absolutely. What was that the scariest part of that deal? What was kind of the scariest part of it? You know, it's obviously your first deal. So kind of talk to you some of that stuff.
So the first year, I mean, it went well. The first year was very good. We put our plan in place. We were raising rents. We were instituting some new fees. We brought U-Haul to the site. And so that was going well. And then probably around our 10-month anniversary, had a huge rainstorm for 3 days, and the floodgates that were controlling the water in the area kind of backed up, and it caused it to flood our lot. And it flooded a little bit into our office, but it did not flood any units, fortunately. That kind of gave us a big scare. In fact, we had a couple employees working there at the time, and the police had to get the hydroplane out to boat them to safety. It was
Oh, wow.
that bad. Yeah. So, had first experience with the news, and reporters on the news kind of trying to talk to us about what it was like there. But that worked out fine. Fortunately, nobody's stuff got destroyed. About 4 or 5 years later, though, there was a massive flood, and that got through most of the units. And that was a bad situation. Got them cleaned out. We gave people rent concessions and stuff for obviously what happened. And a bunch of people lost some stuff, so we provided a dumpster to help them clean their stuff out. But we were able to, after that, we put up a flood wall around the place to help out, and that's not mitigated a lot of the water. So that's kind of what we did after that, and it filled up fairly quickly after that again too, which was nice.
That is nice.
Up and had the flood wall there, and worked out quite well. But that's kind of how we handled it. But we haven't really had a problem the last number of years, which has been good. But
that's good. And do you put tenant insurance in place?
They have the option to get it. Not at some of our places where we require it. At other places, we were kind of late to the game with the tenant insurance. So some of our early facilities didn't have a high adoption, and we weren't pushing it as heavily. As we've grown and acquired other facilities and seen their processes in place and seen how those have worked, we've adopted those and are pushing those more for our other facilities. So it's growing at some of our older facilities, but it's not where things are with some of the ones we've acquired, and we've pushed it from the start. But we're kind of right now, we're to the point where we kind of see where we'll acquire a place and see how they're running it and take the best practices they have, and then use it at some of our existing places as well.
Awesome. Love that. So kind of explain tenant insurance and, why it's there, and, kind of the strategy behind it.
Well, the strategy behind it, it's certainly, most people don't understand that the storage facility has no liability for your goods. It's self-storage. And if you do it right, that means you don't give the lock away. You don't keep a key to the person's unit. It's truly a self-storage, and the person who's renting the space has ownership of the space. That means we don't have any liability for anything that goes on in that space. So if there's someone burglarizes the space, if there's a water leak, which we have no control over, just happenstance, if mice or rodents get in there, then it can destroy people's goods. And you feel bad because they're storing there, and they're storing those goods for a reason with hope to eventually use them in the future. So with the storage insurance, that protects them from any loss or damage there. And there's no deductible on it too in many cases. It depends on what company you use, but in many cases it doesn't have a deductible, where your home insurance or your renter's insurance for your apartment, there's a $500 or $1,000 deductible. Well, chances are your goods are probably only worth $500 or $1,000. So if you have a claim, you're not really getting much, where with the storage insurance you do. And then from a facility standpoint, we usually make around 20 to 25% off each policy that we sell. And that's just an additional revenue stream.
And do you find, you mentioned you required on some properties, but if it's not required, obviously you said it's kind of slow adoption on the older ones, but are you finding that, as you're making it more available, are more tenants jumping on that opportunity to take that?
Absolutely. As we're pushing it harder, and as we're explaining to them the reasons for why they need to get it, why they should get it, and the benefits of it, especially over their homeowners insurance policies, that's where we're getting some better adoption. And that's where I think I've noticed it working out well. I mean, on our early facilities, storage would maybe, or insurance would usually get us facility wide 20-30 bucks a month, nothing to write home about. But some of our newer ones, I mean, we're bringing in close to $1,000 a month in insurance in some cases. So that's good money right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a huge boost towards your NOI and everything as well. And again, kind of a win-win opportunity. It's insurance, so of course, hopefully they never have to use it, but it's there in place. So as you guys have grown, what has the scaling process been like for you guys? What have been some big keys in order to really help you guys scale to where you're at now?
So, and we have brought in some other investors for some joint ventures along the way. As we've scaled, it's a lot been kind of taking what we've gotten and the knowledge we've learned from the first few and trying to apply them to some bigger properties. The first, couple properties were that standard 20-year-old drive up, your drive up storage unit, which is nice. And that's most of what we have still. But then, we've got some with climate control components to it. And the last one we got was a Kmart conversion. So it's all climate control there now. So, as we're getting those, learning how to kind of manage the technology and incorporate more and more of the technology. That's the biggest thing we've seen. How can we take these, and especially as we get more geographically diverse, how do we take these properties and use our existing resources and leverage them to the most efficient manner?
I love it. And we kind of mentioned in the intro, you haven't done any syndication. So kind of talk about, not bringing in, outside capital in terms of passive investors. And, do you think that will change moving forward?
It's starting to change. I mean, the last couple of deals we've done, we've had some family friends. We've done a joint venture parking lot development with a larger apartment provider in town who got to know them, and they had a bunch of land. They had kind of a light industrial piece of property that didn't fit for apartments, but they did not know how to manage the storage component of it. So they brought us in, and we have a piece, and we manage the storage parking side of things, and it goes well. It all depends on just relationships and the people you meet, and just telling people about what you're doing. And that's how it's kind of developed for us. Initially we still had our day jobs, and we're still working full time at that while managing this stuff on the side. And it was busy and stressful, but it allowed us the opportunity to just continue to roll over the capital, all the cash that we were generating from these small apartments and small storage centers at the time. We would roll those in, year over year into that next acquisition. And then we do a cash out refinance, which after a few years, and that would even allow us more capital to get bigger properties. So that was kind of the strategy.
Like the Burr method for self-storage.
A bit like the Burr method. And then at the same time, bringing in some outside investors to help supplement where we need some additional supplement to make the deal work.
So what was it like in the beginning then, you mentioned that lenders, banks in the beginning did not see it for what it is now. And obviously that's changed a ton. Even the SBA, like I was telling you, sees it as a small business. You can actually get an SBA loan. But what was that like in the beginning in terms of, getting lending?
Well, we would go to traditional bank lending, and that's always been our, that's pretty much what we've done anyway for all our deals. We kind of start out with a traditional bank loan, and then after we do our value add, then we'll refi into more of a non-recourse type deal with a LifeCo or CMBS. But I'd say earlier 2012, when we got our first facility, SBA had just started offering these loans. I think maybe sometime in 2010 or 11, I think is when they started the program. So a lot of banks and lenders weren't necessarily too familiar with that. They also are still coming off of the recession, and I think they're a little skittish in some cases. We found a few community banks that we were dealing with, and they were more than happy to lend on the asset. They had some similar assets in place. And when you're, especially if you're starting with more of a smaller to mid-sized facility, you can't go wrong with a community bank. They're hungry for the asset type, especially now. And they're, if it's in the local community, they're always willing to work on it too.
Awesome. Love that. That's great insight there. I do want to touch real quick. You obviously do have some multifamily in your portfolio as well. Do you kind of same philosophy, value add, same markets even, or you kind of different on that as well?
For the storage, we're a little bit, we've spread out. We're you know, we have Ohio, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois now. For the apartments, we're just sticking to our home market just because they're a little bit more intensive to manage. We have, you know, staff in place and management and maintenance staff, but we, but you know, there's just, you're getting more maintenance calls, and sometimes it requires more on-site visits to check out what's going on or take care of this project or that project or make a decision on certain capital projects. So that's why we kind of kept our apartment investing local. I know other people, they'll do syndications and they'll go national, and you know, that's great. I'm more of a control person myself, so I've kind of stayed local, and that's kind of how we build our portfolio on the apartment side. I think it's easier to move further out with storage just because there's less intensive management there, but not saying it can't be done, and it is done in apartments too, but we stay local.
Awesome. Love it. And so do you self-manage those?
Yeah, so we have we do our own self-management. So we have our own staff of some property managers as well as maintenance staff, and they are there to handle the day-to-day issues. And then I'll oversee them and stuff. So that's where we are on the apartment side.
Awesome. Love that. What does the future hold for you guys? What does maybe the next 3 years kind of look like?
So looking to always grow. Hopefully some asset prices will start to cool down a little bit. It's been a little bit expensive. But we're value add. We're also cash flow and type of investors. So if we find an opportunity where we can find some yield, that's what we're looking for, which that's got us to expand our geographic reach some. Will we continue doing some? Maybe, as we become successful managing remotely. Certainly we're willing to look outside of our markets a little bit more. Same with the apartments. You know, as we get more comfortable with those, as the assets we have are turned and more self-sustaining at that point, we'll take advantages and look outside the box a little bit more, look for some markets outside of our own. So maybe it means from Cincinnati going up to Dayton, which is not too far away, or going down to Lexington, Kentucky. Those are all markets we would consider. So.
Absolutely. And those markets starting to take off a little bit for sure. The Midwest is, you know, was always steady for sure. You look back historically, you know, you had your 3 to maybe 5%, but now it's really starting to pick up. A lot of people starting to move there. Obviously with COVID, you know, you can be remote, and people are starting to kind of love that, you know, low cost of living, and kind of allows for a few more luxuries in life.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we are kind of coming up on time here, but I've got 5 questions I ask all of my guests. It's the final 5. First question is, what's the best advice you've gotten from a mentor?
Best advice is take action. You know, get off your butt and do a deal. It's kind of the best advice I'd say. I mean, the first deal is always the scariest. And after you get done with that first deal, not that they're not easy, not that they're not hard, but you don't stress about them nearly as much as you do your first deal. So once you get that first one under your belt, it's easier to get that second and third one. So keep taking action.
Absolutely. Love that. What is it about your career that makes you feel like you're fulfilling your why?
My why? I've always dreamed of being my own businessman. I've always dreamed of having my own business. And it was when I was practicing law or working for other companies, that was always one of the biggest stressors I think I always had, because I could never really allow myself to commit to working for somebody else. So now that I'm doing that, that's really where I found my passion and been able to kind of find contentment.
Awesome. Love that. Favorite non-real estate or investment related book?
Ooh, non-real estate book. I mean, I would say I do like the Rich Dad Poor Dad series. I think it's a good primer and starter. And I know when my kids get to be high school, college age, that's one of the books I'm going to make them read.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of the tried and true. I think almost everyone in this space can kind of pinpoint their sort of light bulb moment to that book, or at least a lot of people I've talked to can, for sure. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, I always wanted to travel through time just to kind of see what things might be like in the future and even in the past. I'm kind of a history buff too, so I like studying history.
If you could go back to one historic moment, because I am as well, one historic moment, do you have one in mind that you would want to be a part of?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm a big World War II, Cold War fan.
Same.
And I enjoy reading up on that time in history. Wouldn't mind seeing the 1960s. Just that's obviously a big time in our history too. So, I at least that right now, those are what stick out.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. Of course you don't want to, relive the horrible moments of World War II, but certainly there's some certain moments there that I would definitely love to go back and be able to be a part of, or fly on the wall on some of those, for sure. Cool. Last question. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you and learn more?
Sure. Well, they can always they can always find my account on Bigger Pockets. I do have an email at J Lenhart, which is first initial last name, at kjlproperties.com. People are welcome to reach out to me for that address as well, and I'm happy to respond as I can.
Awesome. John, thanks so much for your time and all of your insight. I really, really appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. Listen, I know it's cliche and you hear it all the time, but please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you know when the next video is coming out. Even though this is technically a daily podcast, you know it's coming out the next day. We have a ton of content coming your way, so please like and subscribe. It helps a ton. Leave comments. Would love to know what you guys think, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much.